Shabbat Shalom. One. Okay. We are set. So I don't know if you want to just do. No. I was going to set them away. Please.
Has this been used?
No,
Is this yours?
it was. But I can have one.
Oh, I'll get one.
All right. Rose, are you there? Oop, we lost Rose. Okay. Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
So we'll begin page 74 with Matovu.
Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenatecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenatecha Yisrael.
Page 194 or 76. So we join in our blessing that talks about our strength, our bodies, our systems inside of us that work, and how thankful we are that they do work, because if one of them for some reason falters or has a problem, it is so hard for the rest of us to continue to exist. And so in this amazing system of physicality that we have in ourselves, it is just an astounding miracle that all of the things that are supposed to be open inside of us are open, and all the things that are closed are supposed to be closed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yetzar et adam b'chokhmah, uvaravo nikavim nikavim, chalulim chalulim, galui v'yadua lifnei chisei chibodecha, שאם יפתח אחד מהם או יסתם אחד מהם, אי אפשר להתקיים לעמוד לפניך, ברוך אתה אדוני רופא כל בשר ומפליא לעשות. And on page 196 or 78, the companion blessing, the blessing that thanks God for our souls, that which makes us who we are. Elohai neshama shenatata bi Torahi, אתה בראת, אתה יצרת, אתה נפחת בי, ואתה משמרה בקרבי. כל זמן שנשמה בקרבי, מודה אני לפניך, אדוני אלוהי ואלוהי אבותיי ואמותיי, ריבון כל המעשים, אדון כל הנשמות. ברוך אתה, אדוני, אשר בידו נפש כל חי, ברוח כל בשר איש. Turning together to page 198 or 80, for the Nisim B'chol Yom, or our daily blessings that thank God for what seems to be second nature or mundane, but if we think about it, all of these acts that we have of opening our eyes and stretching and being able to take our first steps, getting dressed in the morning, all of that, all help us to prepare ourselves to experience a new day.
How do you want to do it? You want to involve everybody?
Well, sure. Whoops.
We have
Who's
online?
We have my mom, and Rose is online. Rose is going to help lead us in Shema, if we can get her in.
Okay, good.
So why don't we just, why don't you lead, and the rest of us will answer antiphonally?
Perfect. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lasek vivina l'chavhin bein yom uvein laila.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Pokeach ivrim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokev kefufim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokah haaretz al hamayim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten li'aev koach.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hama'avir shenai me'enai utnuma me'afapai.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani b'tselem Elohim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shesani bat chorin.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani Yisrael.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozir Yisrael bigvura.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifarah.
Amen.
And on the top of page 86, we join in our blessing for study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We turn together to page 212, or page 94. Let's join together in the middle of that page. Blessed is the one who spoke, and the world came to be. Blessed is the one. Blessed is the one who continually authors creation. Blessed is the one whose word is deed. Blessed is the one who decrees and fulfills. Blessed is the one who is compassionate towards the world. Blessed is the one who is compassionate towards all creatures. Blessed is the one who rewards the reverent. Blessed is the one who exists for all time, ever enduring. Blessed is the one who redeems and saves. Blessed is God's name. With songs of praise we extol you and proclaim your sovereignty, for you are the source of life in the universe. One God, life of the universe, praised and glorious ruler, your name is eternal. Baruch atah Adonai melech mehulal batishbachot. Page 214 or 96. Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbat, a psalm, a song for Shabbat.
Would you like to do it?
Sure. Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbat, Tov lehodot la'Adonai, u'lezamer l'shimcha elyon, lezamer l'shimcha elyon, lahagid baboker chastecha, ve'emunatcha balelot, עלי אסור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון בכינור. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, לזמר לשמך עליון. Continuing with Ashrei, page 215 or 97.
Ashrei yeshvei beitecha, odia halalucha sela.
Ashrei ha'am shekacha loho, Ashrei ha'am sh'Adonai Elohav.
Tehillah leDavid, aramimcha Elohaicha melech, v'yavarcha shimcha le'olam va'ed.
B'chol yom avarcheka, v'ahalala shimcha le'olam va'ed.
Gadol Adonai umhula me'od, v'litu laton ein checher.
דור לדור ישבח מעשיך וגבורתך יגידו.
הדר כבוד הודיך, ודברי נפלאתך עשיך.
ועזוז נורתך יאמרו וגדולתך אספרנה.
זכר רב טובך
יביעו.
יביעו, וזכרתך ירננו.
חנון ורחום אדוני ערך אפיים גדול חסד.
טוב אדוני לכל, ורחמיו על כל מעשיו.
ידוך אדוני כל מעשיך וחסידיך יברכוך.
כבוד מלכותך יאמרו, וגבורתך ידברו.
להודיע לבני אדם גבורותיו וכבוד הדר מלכותו.
מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור.
סומך אדוני לכל הנופלים וזוקף לכל הכפופים.
עיני כל אליך יסברו, ואתה נותן להם את אטלם בעתו.
פותח את ידיך ומסביר לכורך רצון.
צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו, וחסיד בכל מעשיו.
קרוב אדוני לכל קורב, לכל אשר יקראו באמת.
רצון יראן יעשה, ואת שבעתם ישמע ויושיען.
שומר אדוני את כל אוהב ואת כל רשעים ישמיד.
תהילה אדוני ידבר פי, ויברך כל בשר שם קדשו לעולם ועד.
ואנחנו נברך מעתה ועד עולם. Hallelujah. Page 218 or 100, Psalm 150.
Let's do it together.
Okay?
Hallelujah,
hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah, will be good show. Hallelujah, hallelujah, brekia uzo. Hallelujah, 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 bigvurota. Hallelujah, hallelujah, kerov gudlo. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, beteka shofar. Hallelujah, hallelujah, benevel bechinor. Hallelujah, 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 betov umachol. Hallelujah, hallelujah, b'minim v'ugav. Hallelujah, 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 b'tzil tzilei shama. Hallelujah, hallelujah, b'tzil tzilei truah. Kol hanshama hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol hanshama hallelujah, hallelujah. Continuing on page 223 or page 105. Yishtabach shimcha le'ahad malkeinu. You shall always be praised, great and holy God, our sovereign in heaven and on earth. Songs of praise and psalms of adoration become you, acknowledging your might and your dominion. Yours are strength and sovereignty, sanctity, grandeur, and glory always. We offer our devotion, open our hearts in acclamation. Together, Baruch atah Adonai el melech gadol batishbachot, el hahodaot adon haniflaot, habocher b'shirei zimra, melech el chei ha'olamim. We rise together for Chatzi Kaddish.
Yikada v'yikada shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
B'yama divra chirute, b'yamlich machute, b'chayechon uv'yamechon, uv'chayedecho beit Yisrael. Bagala, bagala, uvizman kariv, v'yimaru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach, le'alam ulome omaya, yitbarach, yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitramam, v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar, v'yitalel, v'yitalal, shemei t'kedeshach,
Barechu.
Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran b'yama, v'maru. Amen. We continue with the call to worship on the next page, the Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed.
And on page 228 or 110, we join together in Yotzer Or, and you can please be seated. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Yotzer Or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei et hakol, hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha barachamim, uftuvo mechadesh b'cho yom tamid ma'aseh v'reishit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, malah ha'aretz kinyanecha. Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu, al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, ve'al me'orei or she'asita yifa'arucha sela, or chadash al Tzion ta'ir, v'nizkeh chulanu mehera lo'or'o, baruch atah Adonai, yotzer ha'me'orot. We turn together to page 231 or 113. Love your neighbor as yourself, you said. As light blinded, we saw that inner and outer worlds are one as you are one. You spoke, and we wrote. We reached for you down the centuries, your light moving before us as we climbed, fell back, and climbed again, your Sinai of life. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher ba'amo Yisrael, be'ahava. As we rise together for the Shema, and we're going to invite Rose to unmute and put your camera on. There you are. And we're going to, there you go. Rose, you have to unmute yourself.
I am.
Okay, great. And go ahead, lead us.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Pirushim Kavod, Malahuto Leolam Vaed, V'yohavtov et Adonai Elohim, Elohecha, v'chol levavecha, v'chol nafshecha, v'chol miodecha, v'hayu hadvarim ha'elek, asher anochi mizavcha hayom al levavecha, v'shimnam tam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, v'shivtecha b'veitecha, uvletecha, v'deriat uvshakbecha, uvkumecha, ukshartam laot ayedecha, v'hayu letotafot bein enecha, uktevtam al mezuzot beitecha, mitzvot me'eret, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Adonai Elohechem emet. Rose, Yasher Koach. Rose is going to be celebrating her bat mitzvah in just about a month, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Nice job.
You did a great job, Rose. Thank you. You can mute yourself. You can leave your camera on if you like, but you can mute yourself. And We're going to continue with page 235 or page 117. Let's join together, top of the page. When justice burns within us like a flaming fire, when love evokes willing sacrifice from us, when to the last full measure of selfless devotion, we demonstrate our belief in the ultimate triumph of truth and righteousness, then your goodness enters our lives, and we can begin to change the world. And then you live in our hearts, and we, through righteousness, behold your presence. So we turn to page 239 or 121. The eternal truth is that you alone are God, there is none else.
May the righteous of all nations rejoice in your love and exalt in your justice.
Let them beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks.
Let nation not lift up sword against nation, nor learn war anymore.
You shall not hate your brother or your sister in your heart.
The stranger that sojourns with you shall be accepted as your equal, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt.
Why do you crush my people and oppress the poor, asks God.
We know that the Eternal One defends the poor and upholds the rights of the needy.
Praise to God Most High.
Blessed is God and deserving of blessing.
So we turn to the following page, 240 or 122, and join in our song of freedom.
Mi chamocha bailim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot, o sefela, o sefela.
שירה חדשה שיבחו גלים לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
Tzor Yisrael, Kuma Bezrat Yisrael, Uvtechinu Mecha Yehuda v'Yisrael, Go Aleinu Adonai Zevaot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch Atah Adonai Gal Yisrael.
We rise together for Amidah, page 242 or 124.
Adonai sifatav tiftach ufi yagita hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imahot, Umevi Gula Livnei V'Nehem, L'man Shemo B'Yahava, Melech Ozer Moshiach Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham V'Ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'elam Adonai, Mechaye HaKol Atah Rab Lehoshia, Mashiv HaRuach U'Marid HaGashem, Mechachel Chaim B'Chesed, Mechaye HaKol B'Rachamim Rabim, So make Noflim V'Rofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem emunato lishenei afar michamocha ba'al gevurot umido melach melech memit umechayeh umasmiya Yeshua v'nemanata lahagot hakol Baruch atah Adonai, מחיי הכל. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב היה נביאך, וקרא זלזל ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ, כבודו. אדיר אדורנו אדוני אדוננו מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו. ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם. אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור. הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גדלך. ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד.
ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the top of the same page, the choreography, Zeh el Zeh, I know that we bow left and right, and then we stand on our toes for Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Could you explain the reason for the bowing and then the toes?
So the idea, it comes from a mystic tradition. So if you go back to Kakatuv al Yad Neviecha, so it was written, and then Kara, and then the angels called Kara Zeh el Zeh to this side and that side.
Oh, okay.
Right? So you go to this side and that side. And then we reenact the experience of both the mystic tradition that says that the angels can't begin their praises of God until we do.
Oh, okay.
Right? So when we send our praises of God to the heavens, that's the angels' cue and permission to begin their praises. So as we send our praises, which are kadosh, holy, you sort of send those to the heavens, and that's God's, or the angels' cue to begin praising God.
Very interesting. And go back, the bowing is just, you said the angels are here and there.
Well, right, so
So we
the
recognize that they're
text,
here
if you,
Oh,
well,
okay.
that translation's not
Very
really.
cool. Well, that was cool. Thank you. Correct.
Yeah, so look, here. Let us sanctify your name on earth. It is as it is sanctified in the heavens above, right? So that's the idea, that you're gonna cue the angels, right?
Cool.
As it is written by your prophet, and it's written here and there.
Okay.
Right? So you acknowledge it there and you acknowledge it there,
Oh, nice.
and then you send your praises to the heavens.
Thank you so much.
So are we going to do Yismechu or V'shamru?
We're going to do the one that we did not do last night.
So that's Yismechu.
Yismahu. Okay, good. Because, variety is a good thing. Yismahu v'malachutecha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'koreg oneg Shabbat. Yismahu v'malachutecha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'koreg oneg Shabbat. Mekadesh, Mekadesh vi Shabbat, kulam yisbeu v'yitarvu metu v'echa, yismechu v'malakutecha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'koreg oneg Shabbat. V'hashvi rasita bo v'kidadato
Shabbat.
Emda yamim oto karata Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat, v'korei oneg Shabbat. Zecher lema'aseh, lema'aseh b'reishit Shabbat. Zecher lema'aseh, lema'aseh b'reishit Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat, v'korei oneg Shabbat.
Page 136 or 254. Please be seated. Let's join together on the top of that page in the English. Find favor, Adonai our God, with your people Israel, and accept their prayer in love. May the worship of your people Israel always be acceptable. God, who is near to all who call, turn lovingly to your servants. Pour out your Spirit upon us. Page 138 or 256. Modim anachnu lach, she'atahu Adonai Eloheinu v'ra'ei avotenu v'imotenu leolam va'ed. Tzur chayenu magen yishenu atahu lador vador. We acknowledge with thanks that you are Adonai, our God, and the God of our ancestors forever. You are the rock of our lives and the shield of our salvation in every generation. Let us thank you and praise you for our lives which are in your hand, for our souls which are in your care, for your miracles that we experience every day, and for your wondrous deeds and favors at every time of day, evening, morning, and noon. O good one, whose mercies never end, O compassionate one, whose kindness never fails, we forever put our hope in you. We turn to page 140 or 258. Our prayer for peace.
Sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, tova uveracha.
Sim,
Sim,
sim, sim, shalom, sim, 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 shalom, tova uveracha. We take a few moments for silent prayer, those prayers that in our hearts, our minds, moments of asking, moments of thanking, moments to just be quiet and reflect on the week that was and our hopes for the week that will come.
Say shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru imru amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael.
Shabbat shalom. Ham yasher koach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. And Rose, thank you. Yasher koach. Very nice. We're looking forward to celebrating with you in the next several weeks. This week we start a brand new book of Torah. Well, I suppose it's not new. We have read it before. Vayikra, or in English, Leviticus. The two words, of course, have nothing to do with each other. The term Leviticus comes from the idea that this is the section that has a tremendous amount of information and directions around the Levitical priesthood. And the word Vayikra is actually, which is the Hebrew title for the text, is the word to be called. So the text begins, you can look at it, page 660 if you want. It says, Vayikra Adonai el Moshe, and God called to Moses. And that's a really interesting beginning. It's actually one of the most unique beginnings of a text. When God speaks to people, what does the text usually say? Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, right? God spoke to Moses and said, which actually follows, because what follows that Vayikra el Moshe is Vayedaber Adonai elav. So why do you need Vayikra and Vayedaber here? Well, Vayikra is that sense of being called. Well, what does it mean to be called? Well, we know from mostly a Christian tradition, that idea of being called. What's your calling? I remember being a rabbinic student, and we were in a group with a number of people becoming ministers. I don't remember exactly what variety, but one of them asked us, so when did you get your call? And all the rabbis in the room kind of look at each other with this sort of, what is he talking about kind of a look. And it was just this moment of, one of my classmates, I think, said, from who? Ed McMahon? It was, No. Ask Mom, she'll explain. But it was this moment of, real understanding that for most rabbis and for most Jews, this idea of personal calling is a little bit foreign. And yet, we have all sorts of ideas in text that call on us to do all sorts of things, right? We are called on to fulfill a whole series of ritual obligations. And even in the liberal communities, though, we have all sorts of things that we are called on to do. And so I think the powerful message, here is that that there are, and it's interesting in that the Aleph at the end of Vayikra is always printed small when it's written in the Torah. And there's lots of midrash around that and why. There's a midrash that talks about, the Bet began the Torah with the word Bereshit, which is the very first word of the Torah, and there's arguments as to why did the Bet get to begin the Torah? Well, Aleph was already first of the alphabet, and so he didn't want to have Aleph get a big head, and so he gave it to Bet, saying it's usually, even beginning of the most important thing is done by an ordinary letter. Here, it's that also that sense of not wanting to be ostentatious about it. And there's lots and lots of other possibilities, as to why that small aleph is there. There are so many different textual traditions and differences as we go through the Torah and its scribal traditions. There are letters that are written sometimes upside down. There are letters that are sometimes half. There's a broken vav in a place. There is in some traditions where you have a Kabbalistic scroll. There are swirls at the end of letters. Each there's a different scribal tradition that different communities evolve to. And they really tried to kind of direct ideas and meanings through it. And often when something is different, bigger or smaller, it's there to emphasize that idea. And here, one of the midrash that you can go from this is, why is the aleph small? Is that the text is trying to draw your attention to it. And Vayikra is that sense of calling. And who is being called? I am being called. And of course, what's the first letter of the Hebrew word for me, which is ani, which is the aleph. So it's as I am being called to a life of Jewish actions and Jewish participation. So, okay. And then the text goes on and details a whole series of sacrifices and participations, and there are lots and lots of different let's say opportunities here, and let's see, go on a bit. It's actually one of the longer parshiot in the text. Where did I want to? So why, if you were constructing this, right? Why would you have it be all of these sacrifices, and that's what we're called for? Why are we called for sacrifice? Well, metaphorically, I think sacrifice is a way of giving our best. Right? In the ancient world, what were you right? You had to offer the best that you had. You couldn't offer the nebbish animal. You had to offer the one that was perfect. Yeah, certainly. And it's a sense of saying you can't offer less than your best. If you're going to offer something, it has to be your best. That you can't, you can't offer what you don't want. You offer what you prize. And I think the powerful message in this whole section is that we don't just offer what we want to give up, but we offer something that we really treasure. And that goes for whether it's a sacrifice or it's what we do today, which is either prayer or commitment to Jewish living or all sorts of different parts of Jewish life. So, okay, Shabbat Shalom. And we are going to continue. Since we've studied Torah, it's a good place to turn together to page 253 or 371 and think of all those in our lives who are needing a blessing of healing. And we think especially of those who have been so powerfully impacted by the war in Ukraine, the continued struggles that so many are having with COVID-19, and we are so deeply thankful that those numbers are on the decline and that we are able to return to many of our in-person experiences and activities. And, this year perhaps we are masked. Next year may we be free.
Amen.
And so we think of all those who are in need of healing of body, of mind, of heart, of spirit. And we mentioned Greg Bennett, Michael Byron, Scott Gordon, Rebecca Gottlieb, Phyllis Levin, Jacob Adams, Pat Hanna, Doug Ford, Steve Toddleben, Michael Goldman, Linda Lyons, Patsy Olson, Zachary Jackson, Bruce Harrell, Andrea Kempner-Blake, Frank Fusaro, Edna Fritz, Katie Alaya, Renee Goldman, Phil DiFrancesco, Jay Kaler, Nancy Kohler, Debbie Perry, Corinne Rhodes, Matea Press, Sheila Cohn, Marilyn Weinecke, Diane Levy, Jeannie Neibauer, Darlene Sharp, Julie Matthews, Dane Marcinowski, Maggie Lee, Noya Grinberg, Stacy Mason, and Ezra Gregory Soika. If you have a name that you would like to add and you are joining us via live stream, please add that name into our chat box. If you're here in person and would like to share a name, please do so.
Misheberach Avotenu Mikor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach Imotenu Mikor HaBracha Leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
We turn together to page 282 as we rise for Elena.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latekdu l'yotzer breshit, shalo asanu kurei haratzot, velo samanu kimishpachot adama, shalo sam chalkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam. Vanachnu korim umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shehu nateh shamayim v'yosef aretz umoshev yikaro b'shamayim imayal ushkinatuzo B'gov hemeromim, hu Eloheinu einod, emet malkeinu efes ulato, kakatu b'torato, v'yadata hayom, v'hashevota elevavecha. Ki Adonai hu Elohim, b'shamayim mimal, v'al haaretz mitachat einod. V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz. Bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad.
Please be seated as we turn our thoughts to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and of death. And we are in the period of Shloshim for Renee Goldberg. And we observed the following yahrzeits on this Shabbat: Joan Harf, Aaron Bernstein, Irma Seligman, Sidney Sherman, Estella Phillips, May Luries, Emma Levy, Levi Epstein, Milton Schaffner, Julius Leopold, Hannah R. Schlesner, Alice Max Rosenbaum, Kurt Robertschek, Sidon Evans, Isidore Lefkowitz, Herbert Jacobs, Max W. Schuster, Simon Spatz, Joseph Marks, Max Sender, Abram Kleinert, Max Goldstein, Louis Rosenzweig, J. Emerson Wolf, Sam Kimmel, Johanna Kapp, Isaac Levi, and Elaine Schuster. If you are joining us via our live stream and you would like to add a name to those of our yard sites, please do so. If you're here in person, please share a name. We turn together to Kaddish on page 294 or 598 as we rise. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ba'alma divrach rutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayecho nuvyomecho nuvchayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach la'alam u'larmeh armaya, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Please be seated. For those of you who are joining us via live stream, we are going to reset and go into our library, so give us a few more moments. There are just a few announcements. We have Gesher tomorrow morning, and we are continuing to do a couple different tzedakah projects. One is the Jewish Community Council of Erie is sponsoring a fundraising drive. They will match any donations that you give to the Jewish Community Council through the month of March to support our fellow Jewish community members in Ukraine. There are probably close to 200,000 Jews who are living in Ukraine, and many liberal congregations, including several Reform congregations there, and we are doing our best to support and help them where we can. So, give us a few minutes and we will reset and continue with our study of Joshua. Shabbat Shalom. Okay, yeah, we can share with the Torah study group.
Well, hey, Media, can I go in part of our announcements at the end or not? Like you're announcing for the JCC.
Yeah, yeah.
Next Shabbat?
Yep.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Andy, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. I got some
Okay.
good news though. I finally got
Yeah.
my room. Yeah, I got my room fixed finally.
Wow.
That's been almost 2 years.
Uh,
So
I thought that was already done.
no, he just promised to do it, and then I told him you got to get over here before I get my knee done. So he did it last week. So he got that done.
Great. Does it look good?
No, it's kind of ugly looking, but you know what? It's functional.
Okay.
And that's more what I'm worried about. I don't want it falling on me.
Right. Yes. Well, yeah.
But it's to fix it up to look normal it'd be like 3,000, 3,500. As it was over 1,000 as it was. So
Wow. Okay.
Good to see you.
That's tough.
Bye, Corn.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Shabbat shalom. I'll see you in a little bit. Okay. We need some books.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What?
We're finishing Joshua.
That's the plan.
I'm not sure he knows that yet.
Hmm?
I'm not sure he knows that yet.
He's been finished more than once. Did we? We're on 24. Is Pam coming back or is she?
She's in the kitchen.
busy?
She's looking at it.
Okay. Well, we'll begin. All right. Well, let's begin. Let's join together in our blessing for study. For those who didn't do so during our service, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, and we are chapter 24, so our last chapter of Joshua. Okay. Last chapter of Joshua. So we have gone through this whole saga,
And we'll talk a little bit at the end of what we're doing next and what we're going to move forward with. But this has been a story of real time. First of all, right? It's not a story that takes place over generations. It's a story of real time experience of Joshua and the capture of the various different cities, and then the establishment clearly of the centrality of Jerusalem as the religious focal point. And the even so much to say that you can't just last week we dealt with the folks who are living across the river, which ostensibly would seem to be that they were a little bit separate from the community of Israel, and so there's this desire to get them to be more interrelated, and a fear that they're going to go off on their own and just do their own thing. And so we send delegations to them to make sure that they're not going to sort of just do their thing, and that they're still fully allied and connected to the mainland, as it were, the mothership. I think we can see this in lots of different countries and empires, right? Mm-hmm. The further the empire goes, the harder it is to get connected to the main source. We even see this, in more modern terms of countries who have held territories outside of the physical boundaries of the country, right? So we have Hawaii, let's say, which has no real purpose to be part of the United States, except that it is, right? There's no geographic reason that it should be.
Well, you see it even smaller. The hospital systems in Pittsburgh that own a hospital in Erie and have zero connection whatsoever.
Right.
On more than one level. There's no reason they should be part of it, but they are.
Right. And so, you have these oversight bodies, whether it's micro or macro, mm-hmm. And they fight to maintain a sense of or power. Really, it's a sense of power. So here we pick up with chapter 24, our last chapter of Joshua. So Pam, it's on a different page. Can't help you.
That's okay.
Okay. So now Joshua is going to follow in the footsteps of a model that was, that he's seen, that Moses did, right? When he said goodbye. Mm-hmm. Right. This is Joshua's turn.
The long goodbye.
Yep. He's not going to rival Moses in the long goodbye, I don't think, but he is certainly going to give it his best. Right. So
unlike Moses who had Joshua with him, he's by himself.
He is by himself, which is a whole other sort of nature, because what he's going to say to them after now is, well, really, Joshua is chosen by God, right? God chooses Moses, and then also God chooses Joshua and says, assign him to be your next in line. And now what we're going to see as we move on is that it's a different process, right? God's not going to choose the leadership. So here we go. V'yasef Yeshua et kol shiftei Yisrael. So a very different kind of a beginning. So have you ever heard the word musaf as a part of the prayer service? Right, for Nusaf, there's a part of the prayer service called Musaf. It usually in conservative synagogues, it means that's when I show up.
I like it.
Which is sort of at the end of nearer to the end of the service, but anyway, it's the repetition of the Amidah. So it's the additional repetition. Okay. But it also means to kind of gather together, to bring together, to collect. And so Joshua assembles all the tribes of Israel at Shechem. Now, there's no real reasoning to do it at Shechem, except that that seems to be a fairly central location.
Okay.
He summoned Israel's elders and commanders, magistrates, and officers, and they presented themselves before God. So Joshua is calling out the leadership. He's calling out both, he's calling out the kind of political leadership, right? Joshua hasn't called in the priests yet, right? So it's the political leaders, it's the elders, the commanders, the magistrates, the judges, right? And the various different officers. Then Joshua said to all the people, "Thus said Adonai, the God of Israel, in olden times your forefathers, Terach, father of Abraham and father of Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates and worshipped other gods." So here, what's Joshua about to start doing?
Kind of giving the history, maybe? History about where we started
And the connections, right? You know, Joshua wants to connect what's going on right now with this long lineage and history. What's Yeches, right? What's the modern equivalent to this?
The royal lineage.
Yeah, but I mean, modern politics here, or you know, countries, whatever. This is when you invoke George Washington.
Okay.
Right? This is when you connect yourself to George Washington or the founding fathers or whatever that is, right? And that's one of the ways that you get legitimacy out of whatever it is you're trying to say. If you can put it into the mouths of George Washington, you're golden. It's like Torah. No, I mean, you know, for the modern American politician, if you can find when George Washington said a similar sentiment, golden. Right?
Well,
Prize.
We as Jews certainly do that. There's his letter to the synagogue at whatever.
In Rhode Island.
Yeah, so that's a big deal.
Yeah. No, and we hold that up all the time.
Yes, yes.
Right? I mean, and we hold it up as proof of what was meant by those initial conversations and intentions of declarations of independence and constitution, right? To bigotry, no sanction, to, you know, that whole piece. Okay. So he's saying Terach lived, way over there, and he was an idol worshiper. But he was the father of Abraham. And so, but I took your father Abraham from beyond the Euphrates and led him through the whole land of Canaan and multiplied his offspring. So I gave Abraham a job. You know, I took him under my wing, per se, and I gave him a job. I gave him Isaac. And to Isaac, I gave Jacob and Esau. I gave Esau the hill country of Seir as his possession, while Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. So we're a little bit of revisionist history here, right? Not exactly that he didn't exactly give Esau something. Esau
Banished him to the hills. Esau.
Well, Esau sort of gets the short end here, right, in the story, I mean, with Jacob, and ends up doing just fine, right? I mean, you know, he has his own, when he meets Jacob as an adult, and Jacob falls over himself, you know, apologizing and fearing and that his brother's going to kill him and attack him, Esau says, I'm fine, you know, I had a good life. I've done just fine, which is, you know, not, well, it's not by accident, but it's the same conversation that happens when Joseph confronts his brothers, right? Okay, now, so we've sort of dealt with the patriarchal, matriarchal figures, right? In these very few sentences, we've sort of summarized the entire book of Genesis.
Yeah.
Right? That's it. The whole patriarchal, matriarchal stories are right there, done brilliantly.
Yep.
I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Just skip Adam and Eve. That's pretty much there.
Yeah, but Adam and Eve aren't consequential to the the patriarchal matriarchal
Right,
stories.
that's it. The only thing
Yeah.
that skipped is Genesis. For that
Yeah.
reason.
Well, and the whole little creation
No.
thing.
Yeah. Well, I know that. Yeah.
No, but the sort of Jewish foundational
Right,
stories,
Right.
you know,
Right.
are there. Anyway, okay.
Okay, move on.
So then I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt with the wonders that I wrought in their midst, which were the plagues, yep. After which I freed you. I freed your fathers from Egypt, and you came to the sea. What's happening here?
It's had we ventured out of Egypt, it's the whole connection of it's not my ancestors, it's me.
The text is really trying to get us to see that although this may have happened generations ago, it's really us. Before the Egyptians pursued your fathers to the Sea of Reeds with chariots and horsemen, they cried out to the Lord, and he put darkness between you and the Egyptians, right? That's the pillar, right? Then he brought the sea upon them and covered them. Sorry. Your own eyes saw what I did to the Egyptians. And of course, what happened to the Egyptians? They drowned in the sea.
But were there actually very many people there that actually technically saw it with their own eyes at that point?
Well, according to the text, there's 600,000 men of fighting age, plus women, children, older people, blah, 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 blah,
So
blah.
how many of them had made it that far, the 40 years?
Well, wait, no, that happens right at the beginning,
Okay.
right? The sea,
You saw it, meaning you, who was in it. Gotcha.
the people of Israel
Right.
saw it.
Not the people who are standing there listening to Joshua talk.
No, but Joshua wants them to understand that they're directly connected.
Right, okay. 1 degree of separation from Kevin Bacon. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Kevin should be Jewish. I don't think he's Jewish.
What's the name, Bacon?
Yeah, maybe not. Got to change his name.
There you go.
Right? Right. After you had lived a long time in the wilderness, I brought you to the land of the Amorites who lived beyond the Jordan.
What verse are you
8.
in? Thank you.
So interesting turn of phrase. After you lived a long time in the wilderness.
That's cutting 40 years down to one little sentence.
Well, and I mean, not only is it cutting the 40 years down to half a sentence here, whose choice was it to live in the wilderness?
Oh, it's God's choice.
Right.
Yeah.
So after you lived in the wilderness for 40 years, what me? You told me to be here.
Yeah.
I didn't decide to schlep around for 40 years. What are you talking about?
More spin.
Right?
For the record, Kevin Bacon is atheist, his wife is Jewish, and they're raising the children Jewish.
Really?
Really?
I didn't know
I
that.
just looked it up.
Okay.
So your person-
I knew he was Jewish.
He's not.
He really is. It's a thing.
Who knew?
All good atheists are Jews. They just don't realize it.
I don't know. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So I brought you to the land of the Amorites who lived beyond the Jordan. They gave battle to you. I delivered them into your hands. I annihilated them from you, and you took possession of their land.
Yeah, this is funny. I annihilated them for you. That war you fought and the casualties you had nothing to do with that. I did that.
Yes.
That's
So it's,
so the people who lost people in the war and the people who fought in the war, are they feeling a little shunned here when God said I did it? I mean, I can see when he put the seas back together and killed the Egyptians that he did that God did that.
Yep.
How did God annihilate them if it was through war and the people fighting?
Well, God vanquishes the enemies all the time in the text, right? I mean,
Right.
we had the whole book of Joshua is filled with times that God, helped out.
Helped out, yeah. But in this case, God's taking full credit.
Well, but it's interesting, right? So God takes full credit for this and yet says, you were wondering.
Jewish mother.
What? It doesn't say, I had you wander in the desert for 40 years and then I took you to the land of Israel. But no, you wandered around.
And then I gave you the land. Oh, this is good.
And this is the story of Balaam and Balak. This is the Amorites. This is the story,
Right.
right? And we know that this is Balak, the king of Moab, sends for Bilam. Bilam is the sorcerer that lives next town over. He's actually instructed by God, one of the very few times that God interacts with a non-Jewish character in the Torah. All right.
Apparently that's important enough to get included in the Reader's Digest version.
Yep. Thereupon Balak, son of Zippor, the king of Moab, made ready to attack Israel. He sent for Balaam, the son of Beor, to curse you, but I refused to listen to Balaam. And he had to bless you, and thus I saved you from him. What's the message there?
Without me, you're still one.
No. Yes, but that's not what I'm going for. Don't believe in the sorcerer next door.
Mm.
Okay.
Because although the king of Moab thought that Balaam the sorcerer could help, I am pulling the strings. I told Balaam what he can say and what he can't say. Which means in the hierarchy of God, I'm in charge.
I refused to listen. He had to bless you, and thus I saved you.
Right.
Pretty good bargain.
Right? It's right there. Then you crossed the Jordan and you came to Jericho. So we're going through this history, right? This is the same thing that Moses does. Right? The entire book of Deuteronomy is Moses retelling the story. This is Joshua's version. This is taking a page out of that model. So you then crossed the Jordan and you came to Jericho. The citizens of Jericho and the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Gershonites, the Hivites, the Jebusites fought you. All these folks you had broigas with, basically. Right? Why were they fighting you?
Because it was their way.
Because you're invading.
Right.
But what does God do for you?
Delivers them to you.
But I delivered them into your hands. I sent a plague ahead of you, and it drove them out before you, just like the two Amorite kings, not by your sword or by your bow. So, to your question, in terms of, who's responsible in a war, well, right here, it's God saying, well, it's nice that you had an army and you had chariots and bows and all of this, but it's really the fact that I, sort of set this up for you.
I weakened them so they ran. They didn't run because you were strong. They ran
Right.
because they were weakened by me.
Right.
Yeah.
It's when you can't open the jar, right? I loosened it for you.
Yeah.
I have given you a land for which you did not labor, and towns for which you did not build. These are the towns of the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, blah, blah, blah. Okay? And you have settled in them. You are enjoying vineyards and olive groves, which you did not plant. So in other words, you took over these cities that were pre-established.
Mhm.
And it's an amazing spin, right? It's an amazing, not that we displaced all these people,
Mhm.
but they prepared it for you.
Right. Very much like a father telling the kid, I handed you my business.
Yeah.
You didn't develop this business. I'm giving it to you, and they do work for you now. You had nothing to do. Be grateful.
I have a question. So I know Joshua is saying all this, Do we know, is God telling Joshua to say all this, or is Joshua just saying it,
It's the teleprompter.
Does that make sense? I mean, we really don't know.
The only thing we know is that this is Joshua's speaking to the people. Now, there's a little bit of a thing here because it says, he gathers them all together before God.
Okay.
Right? So it's ostensibly in this sacred space idea
Yeah.
before God, but we don't have God participating in this scenario here. This is not the Sinai moment that everybody hears God's message. Right? This is not that. This is a human transmission.
Right.
This is Joshua speaking to the folk.
Is it kind of egotistical, I guess?
For God? Yeah.
No, for Joshua.
Not his words.
Well, he's not saying he's speaking for God,
Right.
right? He's saying, this is what God,
He's reminding me, this is what God's done for us.
right? So, this is what God has said to us. Right? Thus said, so up verse 2, then Joshua said to all the people, thus said the Lord, the God of Israel. And then there's this whole speech, right? So Joshua is speaking in the name of God, saying, this is what God has told us. And he's summarizing in his own way here, right? I mean, he's very much, relating what the events were, but in a very Reader's Digest sort of version.
Would this be a different generation from the generation that crossed over the Jordan? Okay.
Yeah, we're 40 something years.
You're right, I forgot that detail. And Josh is very old now.
Yeah.
So maybe it's good for them to hear this younger generation, to be reminded.
Absolutely. I mean, it's that same process.
Yeah.
Right? That same process of time having passed,
Right.
and now we've got to review the story. Right? Which is the same thing that Moses does, right? At the end of Deuteronomy, right? Moses says, we've been wandering for 40 years. Remember when we left Egypt, you did this and we did this, and remember we got to the golden calf and and then we had the thing, and then we had and we go through this whole history again.
Right.
And this is exactly the same parallels text, right?
That's what Jewish education is. We're teaching our children, and we teach their children. And we're sitting here today on one of the Hebrew days.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
Now, therefore, revere the Lord.
Okay, right. So verse 14. So God does all of this stuff for, God does all of this for you. You don't do it very much. You didn't even have to build the cities. All you had to do was show up and live in them. You didn't have to plant the olive trees, which meant you didn't have to wait 7 or 8 years before you could get olives from them, which olive trees take forever to grow.
I don't like olives.
Love olives.
Then you call yourself Jewish.
But I like olives.
Get well.
And so did Papa. So,
Right.
That was good, Brad. Sorry.
So slippery.
so what the next line basically says is, when I'm gone, don't think you can fall back on the old ways. Like when Moses turned his back, he had a golden calf. Whenever the leadership leaves, you kind of fall apart. This is saying, I'm leaving. Keep worshiping God and revere God, because that's what you're going to be.
Well, you owe, right? Remember when you are, deciding to do whatever you're going to do, that you didn't get here by accident. You got here because God gave this to you. So now, therefore, revere God and serve God with undivided loyalty. Put away the gods that your forefathers served beyond the Euphrates and in Egypt, and serve God. Or, if you are loath to serve God, choose this day which ones you're going to serve. The gods that your forefathers served beyond the Euphrates, or those of the Amorites in whose land you are settled. But I and my household will serve God. So in other words, You're in or you're out. You're with us or against us. Kind of a thing. But it's the ultimatum. Right? You can't think of yourself as part of Israel if you're busy observing something else. Right? Which I think is still a struggle for people. You know, you can't be, and I've had this conversation with people who have wanted or been interested in conversion, and they said, you know, all of the Jewish holidays and everything is exciting. I just want to figure out a way to integrate Jesus.
Jews for Jesus.
Right? And part of it, you know, and politely, it's sorry, doesn't work. Right? Because the whole fundamental theology of Jesus doesn't coincide with the Jewish observance, blah, blah, blah. Right. Okay. Well,
Even though he's nice to
but, yes, but
With a God
but yeah, he got nailed for it.
Exactly.
Was that crossing the line?
Nope, not in this. Not in this room.
Yeah, it's on YouTube though. It's,
Oh.
oh
Do
well.
you have just one course at rabbinical school that's just jokes, rabbi jokes? Because you have a lot of them.
No, it's
It's 20-some years experience.
25 years this year.
Awful tough.
Yep. I got my in May I'm getting my Doctor of Divinity.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Honorary doctorship after 25 years.
Yeah,
You're long enough
you get it after 25 years of rabbinic service.
Get to this music and this-
Oh, wait.
But they so they send this email, which is lovely, and then they say, oh, by the way, if you want to keep your doctoral hood, it's $165.
They're like, who's who? You can buy the book. We'll put you in it for free. You can buy it for $100.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, whatever. Like who you know? And I'm thinking,
Title, they'll call you Dr. Rabbi.
No.
Rabbi Doctor.
no.
In Germany, it's Mr. Doctor. It's Herr Doctor.
And it would be Rabbi Doctor.
Do you have to have like a certain amount of publications or writing?
No, you have to
Hang around,
survive.
Hang around.
I meant in addition.
After 25 years, you have to still be working as a rabbi, and that means, you know. So they call it the Doctor of Divinity, but we affectionately refer to it as the Doctor of Durability.
That's actually good.
Okay.
All right.
It's a nice way to celebrate something. It's fine. In reply, the people declared, far be it from us to forsake Adonai and serve other gods. Right? They said, V'ya'an ha'am v'yomer Chalila lanu. It means like, God forbid. In other words,
No pun intended.
Total pun intended.
total pun intended. Chalila lanu me'azov et, that we would go away from Adonai.
Now, are they presuming 100% of the people did this? Do you think few people said, okay, see you later, cup of cat?
No, this is rhetoric,
Okay.
right? This is rhetoric. This is not, you know, so when Joshua says, okay, choose,
Yeah.
It's much more like parents who say, you know, well, you can run away from home if you want.
Right. If you're standing here, we already know what your decision is.
Yeah. For it was Adonai our God who brought us and our fathers up from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage, and who wrought those wondrous signs before our very eyes and guarded us all along the way that we traveled and among all the peoples through whose midst we passed. So this is these are the peoples acknowledging that process, right? Then Adonai drove out before us all the peoples, the Amorites that inhabited the country. We too will serve Adonai, for Adonai is our God.
So, dumb question.
Yeah.
Or maybe not dumb question.
Whatever.
In 2022, why is Israel fighting to keep areas? If God wanted them to keep it, wouldn't God just wipe the people out and give it to them? Why is the country of Israel and the Knesset and all the people in charge saying this is ours, this is ours, this is ours. If it was actually ours, wouldn't God just give it back?
God did.
Yeah, but if God gave it back,
God didn't.
okay. So that's why, okay. So what happened in between?
The British and the French guy.
Seriously, I mean, it seems like if God
Well,
wants us to
okay,
have
but
it,
if you look,
we'll have it. If God doesn't want us to have it, we won't. Should there be constant fighting and
well, look, don't confuse biblical rhetoric with realities of 21st century life, right? I mean, you
I don't
know,
know.
if you really want to, you know, biblically though, so you can look at biblical Israel, and
Mhm.
it's a much larger, you know, sort of encompassing geography than what the modern state of Israel is today. So, you know, to say that, you know, one is whatever, and there are those who make the argument that says, look, you know, Israel won this land in the various different wars,
Mhm.
and therefore it's theirs, and
You're
they have
squatters.
no need to give it back, and you can go join your friends across the river there.
Mhm. Eric would have the good part of this kind. Eric would
Yeah, I mean, you know, and it is an incredibly complicated series of events because you have, you know, I cannot have a conversation about what goes on in Palestinian territories and whether or not they're or they're not there, or they get land or they don't get land, or they get compensated or they don't get compensated, without also having a conversation about the close to 800,000 Jews who were expelled from the various different other Arab countries, also as a direct result of the conflict.
Mhm.
Right? So I'm not going to talk about the Palestinians in Ramallah without talking about the Jews in Cairo.
Mhm.
And until we talk about everybody, then, you know,
So
because if you want to talk about, look, if you want to talk broad scale, essentially the same number of Palestinians were displaced out of their homes in what is now Israel as Jews were displaced out of their homes in the various different Arab countries.
Right.
So net, we're about equal, and call it a day and move on with your lives, which is essentially what the Israelis have always done. Right? The Palestinians have been held hostage almost by the political forces of the Arab world, and it's made it almost impossible for them to move on.
But is it God's will? Or is it political 2020 rhetoric?
Could be yes, right?
But if you read this in that religious tone, it says because they're not serving the God of Israel's religious nation, he says he will turn and act harshly towards you, and that's what he's doing now. So, I mean, if you look at this in that context.
Yeah. It's complicated, right? I mean, if you look at India and Pakistan, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the same sort of circumstance. You had two peoples. You had very much of a population exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And you've had continuous wars since.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
I'm just saying, should it be this difficult if God really wanted Israel to have the land? Should it really be this difficult? Because through history, I got in the way, I wiped them out, I gave you the land.
But what didn't Israel do in 48, 56, 67, 73?
They didn't lose.
They didn't wipe them out.
That's true. They stopped and called it a day. True.
Right. And so, because that was antithetical to the way in which the world Jewish community or the world, Israel as a democracy could see itself doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Had they pushed them all out, we may not be in this same circumstance.
Right. And that's what would have happened in biblical times.
So in biblical times,
put all the king's heads on the posts and all of that. Okay. Now that makes sense. That actually makes sense right there, isn't it? In biblical times, They cleared the land and they made statements and put heads on posts, and now they just
They
say,
cleared it out, but
we're
you
content,
know,
we've done enough damage.
they really tried to work together.
Yeah.
Look, it's never pretty. But if you looked at sort of life in the first 20 years after the 67 war, there were more advances in terms of building universities and hospitals and services and all that
Mhm.
than there were in most other Arab countries.
Right.
And it has gone through lots of trauma, in between. But but we will deal more with this particular topic in May when we have our Scholar in Residence program
Okay.
with the Arava Institute.
Well, beans.
And Eric is going to be our
I'll say it's Eric. This is his thing. So.
yeah, no, Eric is going to be our Scholar in Residence, and we'll do some bread stuff and yeah. So, okay. Joshua, so Joshua, however, said to the people, "You will not be able to serve Adonai, for God is a holy God. God is a jealous God. God will not forgive your transgressions and your sins. If you forsake Adonai and serve alien gods, God will turn and deal harshly with you and make an end of you after having been gracious to you." In other words, there's serious punishment down the line if you don't behave. But the people replied to Joshua, "No, we will serve Adonai." Thereupon Joshua said to the people, "You are witnesses against yourselves." So, Vayomer Yeshua el ha'am, so God spoke, or not God, Joshua spoke to the people, "Edim atem, you are witnesses, bachem, amongst yourselves, ki atem, because for you, you have to be your own witnesses."
What does that mean?
A witness is, in other words, this is what you believe in. But you have to be that for yourselves. God's not going to come in and do that with you. You are witnesses against yourselves that you have by your own act chosen to serve Adonai. And they answered, that they answered, "Yes, we are." Then put away the alien gods that you have among you and direct your hearts to Adonai, the God of Israel. And then the people declared to Joshua, "We will serve none but Adonai our God, and we will obey none but God." Okay, so this is the people reenacting the covenant between God and the people of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is the connection.
So skipping back a couple of sentences.
Yeah.
He says God is a jealous God. That's not the only place in the Torah it says God is a jealous God.
Yep.
But God tells us not to be jealous or envious.
Mm-hmm.
There's a double standard. I've always wondered about that, because jealousy is not a sin, envy is a sin. But yet, if God's a jealous God, why should we not be jealous of others?
Where does it say that India?
Well, you shouldn't covet the property of your neighbor.
It's in the Ten Commandments.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I never heard it phrased.
Well, jealousy, coveting, there's several different places where they talk about it.
Okay.
Yet God is a jealous God. That seems like a double standard. I've never asked the question.
No. What's the difference between God saying, either you're believing in me or you're not? You can't do both.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very different than saying, I really like Brad's iPad.
But is that being jealous if you're envying another God, or being bitter, or something? It doesn't seem like it's being jealous of. I don't know.
I don't think it's jealousy in the way that we think of like a car. It's not like material jealousy. It's a I will like I've got to be jealous if you're jealous.
But is it like a kid being upset because a parent favors the other child? That's jealousy.
Mhm.
And that seems like what this is, which would then be similar to coveting what the neighbor has. No? It just seems to me to be conflicted. Every time they use God as a jealous God, it strikes me as that doesn't make sense. It seems like it's against the values that we're supposed to hold. That if God has those values, why can't we? It's Taurus night. It's a good time to ask this.
No. It's a good question. It's a good question.
Is the Hebrew word, like, does it actually translate?
Yeah, that's what I was
to the
just
other
saying.
state?
El kanot, el kano, which is the same as the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the same Hebrew word. I think that there's, in the same way, I just think there's a difference between God saying, "I am intolerant of you," wanting others,
Mhm.
and that whole other, of being jealous of someone else's stuff.
But if your spouse starts ogling somebody else, you can be jealous of that, which is not appropriate. If nothing else is going on. So if you're contemplating another God, it's the same idea as your spouse looking at somebody else. And that to me would seem very similar. I don't know, it just always struck me as strange for years that God is a jealous God just seems to not fit. I don't know.
I tried to look up what the difference was in, if there was
There's probably no right answer,
different times.
What do you think, Liliana?
I was gonna say, I think it's odd that he's saying, put away your gods amongst you. Why in the first place, if they were following Moses' rules and that he gave to the people, why have they got other gods amongst them? All of a sudden they have these gods? That sticks out to me. And they wouldn't have mentioned it if it wasn't happening.
Good point. And that goes back to
Put away the alien gods that you have among you.
Well, he's clearly addressing a reality that these
Right.
people have more than one set of belief systems here. They have collected, or they have been infiltrated by other groups, and you have these other gods that are kind of floating around a little bit.
Mhm.
And Joshua is sort of giving the sort of the naughty talk, if you will, saying, no. You need to,
Well, that'd be like if you had girly magazines, your wife said don't be looking in the girly magazines. You know what I'm saying? And that's it all because it just seems straight. So yeah.
Okay. So
Moving on. We gotta
because
finish
otherwise
Joshua.
we gotta finish.
12 minutes to finish Joshua.
There, we're fine. On that day at Shem, Joshua made a covenant for the people, and he made a fixed rule for them. Joshua recorded all this in a book of divine instruction. Right? Sound familiar?
Mhm.
Right? This is the same process that Moses does, right? That Moses wrote down the whole Torah and blah, blah. He took a great stone and set it up at the foot of the oak in the sacred precinct of God, of Adonai.
Mhm.
Right? And Joshua said to all the people, see, this very stone shall be a witness against us. It's really, against us is not really, it will stand as evidence of what we believe. For it heard all the words that Adonai spoke to us. It shall be a witness against you, lest you break faith from your God. Joshua then dismissed the people to their allotted portions. So we're setting up a monument saying, this is going to be testimony to the fact that this happened.
Mhm.
Okay? After these events, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110 years. What's significant about 110 years? Nothing,
What's that?
Yeah,
except it's not 120,
yeah, I was thinking that.
which is Moses.
Right.
Right? That's the sign. So he's less than Moses, right? Joshua is always a little less than Moses. They buried him on his own property at Timnath Serah in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. What's also significant?
Inside the separate shrine to him somewhere.
We know where he's buried.
Oh.
Well,
So to speak.
Oh, we kind of know.
But somewhere in that big
I
land.
mean, the text tells us where he's buried.
Right.
The text is very clear not to tell us where Moses is buried.
Right.
Right? Why? Because there's a danger that Moses is going to be seen as a deity and will be worshipped, and Joshua doesn't have that. Right? So we're clearly relating the way in which the people are looking at Joshua. They're looking at him as a guy. He's a military leader. He's led us. He's a guy. Israel served the Lord during the lifetime of Joshua and the lifetime of the elders who lived on after Joshua and who had experienced all the deeds that Adonai had wrought for Israel. The bones of Joseph, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried at Shechem in the piece of ground which Jacob had bought for 100 kistas from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, and which had become a heritage of the Josephites.
They didn't bury Joseph until Joshua died?
Well, they carry his bones,
I know.
right? So they leave Egypt, they schlep his bones with them, and it doesn't say when Joseph's bones were buried. It just says that the bones of Joseph, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried at Shechem.
So they're tying up loose ends.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So it could have been, and it says that this had become a heritage of the Josephites. Right. So this has already been happening,
Okay.
and so Joshua is now being connected to Joseph, which means he's being connected to the inherited chain of tradition of leadership of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Joshua.
It's also interesting, they were from the children of Hamor, which brings back the story of Dinah.
Right? So what happens with Hamor and Shechem? What happens in Shechem?
I don't remember.
Jacob is in Shechem, and his daughter Dinah either is raped or she falls in love with a Shechemite.
That's right.
We're not exactly sure which way it goes down. And they agree that they will join the Israelite community. And one of the conditions is that they circumcise everybody. And on their third day of recovery, Jacob's sons go in and kill everybody in Shechem.
Mhm.
So who are the descendants of Hamor?
Well, they kill the men. Ostensibly, they had children and whatever. So, yeah. But Eliezer, son of Aharon, also died, and they buried him on the hill of his son Pinchas, which had been assigned to him in the hill country of Ephraim.
One more loose end title.
Right? Right. And so it's really kind of bringing it together, and it really is separating out priesthood and divine and religious leadership from political leadership.
Mhm.
It's very careful to kind of say, okay, we have Eliezer over here and we have Joshua over there, and they're not even buried in the same place. We're just going to separate them out. And the book sort of drops off the cliff,
And we're done. Go on to Judges.
right? In fact, you can almost say that the book actually ends with verse 28.
Right.
And that 29 is the postscript.
Mhm.
Because 28 is a much better ending.
Right, which is why I said, why are they suddenly bringing up the bones of Joseph and everything else? Okay.
Right? This is the, 29 through 33 is really the postscript.
Right. It's basically because we're not going to cover it anywhere else. We better get it somewhere because people are going to ask the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there had to be a purpose. They leave questions all the time. Yeah, so there had to be a purpose for saying this. And that's, tie it to loose end or
Well,
set something up for the future.
Well, what do we have to, otherwise we have lots of questions, right? What was, where did Joshua get buried? What was his status? How old was he? Was he older than Moses? And so they want to wrap all of that up. And they want to make that clear.
Right.
So, well, friends, that's Josh.
That was very interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
That was fun.
I just took a peek into Judges, and it actually carries on.
Yes,
After the death of Joshua.
Yeah, because that's because the editor probably had some editing to do in terms of connecting the two.
The other thing I think that in modern day, you hear a Biden always say, "God bless the troops of America." It's sort of a carry on that God is with us.
Mm-hmm.
I think other armies and troops do that as well.
Sure, we invoke divine providence or divine assistance or care or whatever. We do it all the time. I thought next week, since it's Purim, or just after Purim, we would do a little Megillah study next week and then begin Judges the week after.
Could we OG this?
Yes,
You know that reflects me, right? OG.
original.
That's the little girl with Miguel Guerrero. OG. You're too young. You guys might remember.
I know Megillah Gorilla.
Yes.
I remember.
Hanna-Barbera.
Yep. Yep.
OG.
It's one of my favorites. Okay, so wishing everybody Shabbat Shalom, and next Friday we've got our Shabbat Purim, which should be a lot of fun, and then Saturday we'll do our Purim Megillah study and move from there.
Sounds good.
All right, Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Yeah, Hanna-Barbera got the name again from all the